I'm going to the moon. Literally, I'm going to go to the moon.
Whoa. Time out here, Tim. Let's get the reality police here on this particular story because, yeah, I'd say that there is a decent chance that you're going to the moon, that there is a realistic possibility that you're going to the moon, but an absolute certainty with the same kind of certainty that NASA makes these kinds of announcements? Not really, man. And I'm not sure if you really believe this. I'm not sure how much you've been drinking of Elon's Kool-Aid, but there are lots of reasons as to why this mission may not happen for many years, a decade or even longer, or it may not even happen at all. I am in no way happy, especially for Tim Dodd's sake, to have been proven right about all of this thing with Dear Moon. But as time went on with Starship, especially given how long ago the project was announced, I became more and more convinced that the whole prospect of sending a team of civilians to orbit the moon anytime this decade was becoming increasingly unlikely, especially if one considers SpaceX's obligations to Artemis. For those of you unfamiliar with Dear Moon, I'm just going to go ahead and read the press release from the Dear Moon team, actually from Yusaku Maezawa, who was the primary patron for the mission. Quote, in 2018, Yusaku Maezawa announced Dear Moon, the world's first civilian circumlunar voyage aboard SpaceX's space vehicle Starship. The plan had included artists from around the world who would participate in the project to share the invaluable experience in space with the rest of the world. Arrangements were being made with SpaceX to target the launch by the end of 2023. This was always a ridiculously optimistic date, and finally Mr. Maezawa seems to have realized that, and the announcement goes on, quote, unfortunately, however, launch within 2023 became unfeasible and without clear schedule certainty in the near term. It is with a heavy heart that Maezawa made the unavoidable decision to cancel the project. To all who have supported this project and look forward to this endeavor, we sincerely appreciate it and apologize for this outcome. Although Dear Moon is canceled, Maezawa and Dear Moon crew members will continue to challenge themselves in their respective fields. We will hold deep respect for SpaceX as they continue to venture into uncharted territories, while we ourselves will move on to the next challenge. So even though Maezawa certainly had an alternative to say that perhaps at some point in the future we will reschedule Dear Moon or something to that effect, it is very clear that he has no confidence that this can happen anytime in the near future. That is to say, the capability of orbiting the moon with Starship with a crew of civilians on board anytime soon, and therefore he needs to spend his money on something else. And once again, it brings me no pleasure to be right about this whole thing. And to be clear, I always thought that Dear Moon might eventually happen, assuming that Maezawa had limitless patience for the project, but obviously he does not, and given that a whole lot of money needs to be tied up in Starship in order to make something like this happen, it's clear that he no longer wants to invest his billions in such a project. However, there are other media organizations who seem to be taking gleeful pleasure in all of this. I'm going to go ahead and read some excerpts from an article on Space Explored and also give you my reaction. The mission was announced in 2018, back when SpaceX was planning to make Starship out of composite material and was designed to look like the classic Tintin rockets of Elon Musk's childhood. Also, the launch date for Dear Moon was shared declared to be 2023, a classic over-optimistic Musk timeline. Well, actually, I agree with that. However, I'm not too happy about the next sentence. However, as Dear Moon continued to believe the crazy truth that it would fly in 2023 or 2024, it picked a crew and hyped up the mission. Meanwhile, SpaceX made much slower progress on Starship development than originally dreamed up by Musk. Okay, I don't think anybody believed a so-called crazy truth that Starship was going to be flying in 2023 or 2024 when Tim Dodd made his announcement back in 2022. So that's just an exaggeration. In November of 2023, the Dear Moon mission was delayed indefinitely due to Starship not being capable of launching the mission until it finished its development. Dear Moon would have been the first private mission to fly around the moon, and instead of carrying scientists or researchers, its crew would have been full of artists and athletes. Its goal was to further inspire future generations in science, technology, engineering, art, and math. Sadly, the mission, a mission that truly would have been wonderful and from a technical standpoint could have been done, will not materialize. Truly, no one is really shocked by this development. Dear Moon seemed to have just stuck to Musk's unrealistic timeline and did not take into account the years of delays it was going to face. It did not need to end this way, but the full statement makes it sound that Maezawa is done with the space endeavors for now. Let's look at the Polaris program as a good example. They too plan to fly a crewed mission on Starship. SpaceX even granted them the honor of being Starship's first crewed mission, and there is yet to be even a hint of a mission timeline yet. Polaris understands that there are still many years until Starship is capable of even a simple crewed mission. Dear Moon seemed to believe that it was always around the corner. Okay, that may have been the case, but that would have been Maezawa's misconception, not the misconception of anybody else. Once again, I don't think Tim Dodd or most of the rest of these passengers thought that Dear Moon was going to happen anytime sooner than close to the end of this decade. And now that Starship's future missions have suffered their first high-profile casualty, I think we all need to be asking ourselves just how realistic is it to think that Lunar Starship is going to be putting astronauts on the surface of the moon anytime soon. Maezawa was probably forbidden from sharing any information as to where Lunar Starship was in this developmental process, but given the fact that a mission to orbit the moon was just canceled because of uncertainties, the prospects of landing astronauts on the moon with Lunar Starship are going to be even more difficult. Once again, to reiterate, Starship needs to master low Earth orbit refueling and reusability before this mission can become realistic, and that is not going to happen for some time. And also, Starship needs to develop a resilient and reliable life support system, and also master the process of landing this colossal spacecraft on lunar regolith at the lunar South Pole. Those are all colossal challenges, far more challenging actually than the prospect of orbiting the moon with a few civilians. It sure would have been nice if NASA had picked a simpler and more realistic HLS system as an alternative to Starship in case something like this actually took place, but instead they chose something even more difficult, even further in the future, and even more complicated in Blue Origin's solution. Again, demonstrating that if you are a billionaire, your solutions are going to be picked by NASA regardless of how unrealistic they might be, simply because you can invest more of your own money in the proposal and your competitors can't. And by the way, in my opinion, that gives these competitors an unfair unfair advantage in future bids. And not only does it give him an unfair advantage, it could lead to very serious consequences to our plans to return to the moon. Hopefully, Starship's development picks up here in the near future, because it's the only solution that's going to realistically get us back to the moon. Blue Moon is at least a decade out, if not longer. I can't believe that Jeff Bezos managed to buy himself into that contract, but he did, and so here's where we're stuck. Thank you very much for watching. Please like, please subscribe, please try to not get too angry if you're a SpaceX fan, because keep in mind, I still believe that Starship is the long-term solution for exploring the solar system, just not the best short-term solution for Artemis. And as always, stay angry about space.